Oh my God, I gave you host. Oh wait, no, it's recording. Okay, we're recording. All right, hi everybody. So I have these two amazing guests with us. We have Lilia from talk about, briefly introduce yourself and what you do.
All right, so I'm from Toronto, Canada. I have been a self-employed life coach for about a year, and my passion is to help Asians pursue careers they love, even though it's not typically seen as stable or high-paying. So that's me. And yeah, Annie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Anni Ma, and I'm just a unconventional Asian American woman. I grew up in California my whole life, and I moved all the way to Vietnam to escape the rat race, to find some freedom for myself.
Woo.
Yeah, I'm working on trying to build a small business.
Awesome.
What kind of business by any chance?
A business that makes money.
Oh, please tell us about it more.
Have you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Yeah, not really. I've heard
of
okay.
I've heard
good. I'll tell you about Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's the first finance book that I read, and my mentor, he's the first mentor that I had. He inspired me to get into financial independence. And he talks about this quadrant where there are people who are employee bracket, and then there are investors and business owners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he really showed me that when you are working for someone else or working hourly, you are capped. Your earnings are capped by however much your hourlies are. But if you're an investor or a business owner, your earning potential can be unlimited, right? And he wanted me to go on that path of like not limiting yourself and your capabilities, and really try to learn how to build some skills in the business area. And for me, I'm a very creative, artistic, spacey kind of person. So it's challenging for me to get into this space, learning a little bit more about marketing. But I have to always just challenge myself that I'm not limited by my thinking. It's just like how much time you put into it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited for your journey. It's funny because I'm still finishing up school. It's been a long time, a long way through, had a lot of failures with my academic career, but I was just figuring things out. And now I'm kind of I'm thinking about going to that entrepreneurial route as well, like Lilia and Annie. And it's crazy because I was studying pre-med originally for school, but now I'm like, I don't know if medical school's for me. So let me see how I can figure myself out. And I'm kind of like in the same path as you guys, where we're trying to learn all kinds of ways to make money financially independent instead of just thinking about working for corporate. Kind of the less non-conventional way of making money. So I wish the best of luck to all three of you guys, really. I know we're gonna make it. We're gonna make our goals happen. Maybe this year, maybe next year, who knows? But never give up on your entrepreneurial spirit
journey. Because like people kind of take like maybe like 7 years to create like a business generally. But the thing is that you learning those skills of how to build a business, that will never go away. Like you are like independent and know how to like do things. I'm on the step of learning how to do that.
Yeah, it's gonna be quite it's gonna be a lot of failures and lots of mistakes to make for all three of us. And it's gonna be lonely, but I know that we are going to be ultimately happy in the end for the kind of goals that we have for ourselves, and it's gonna be rewarding when it happens,
There's this picture that I saw recently of this is how I feel about failure. Failure is really icky. When I'm faced with it, I rather like run away and not like learn, because there's a picture of like all these failures stacked up on the person's head and just like weighing them down, and it's really sad. And then there's a second picture of someone using these bricks of failures as staircase. Like every failure is a lesson learned to get you to the next step of figuring out something that works. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Love
I
that
agree.
image.
Yes, I could see that in my life. It goes from like kind of like this, but then it goes like that's what that's how I'm seeing my life right now. But then it might go like this and like be like a roller coaster, you know, but you know, those peaks is what we're shooting for. All right, well, that kind of wraps up our introduction. I hope you get to know our each other a little bit more. During this talk, we're hoping to talk a little bit more about self-love, a little bit about our coaching therapy sessions, the journey with that, and a little bit about body positivity. So I guess we'll just jump right in with our therapy experiences and how do we get started with getting therapy? Was it scary? And how did you guys grow over time after attending these sessions and find self-love?
Wow, let's see. I have also like another unconventional story. This guy found me on the internet and started talking to me, and I ignored him for a year, and he became my mentor. He was just so consistent in like seeing me. He's just like, I see your potential. Like, I'm here for you when you need it. And it came through where I vetted him out and got to know him, and he was genuinely a really good guy. He's a financial educator, and for me, I trusted him a lot, and I started like crying and bawling out because I was just a college student, graduated with $20,000 of debt, no real skills. I was driving for Lyft, and I didn't even want to apply for corporate jobs because I didn't want to get like rejected because I don't know if I could do it. So I had a lot of low self-esteem and a lot of problems, and I would just cry and snot in his car. And the most valuable thing that he gave me was just like his insights, because I was in this small universe, and he was just like out here. He's like, here, let me drag you out. Like, stop thinking that way and like open up your eyes a little bit, open up your opportunities, your mind a little bit. And it was just that for 2 years. And I realized that I had so much limiting beliefs. One of them was having low self-esteem that was keeping me really small. And once I like opened that up, my world got a little bit bigger. And just having a mentor is really important because it opens up your eyes to stuff that you can't see yet.
Yeah, it has like a different perspective of how you see yourself. Like, for example, I didn't know that I was very harsh on myself, and I'm pretty sure you guys could see that about yourselves too, due to the upbringing and expectations of like being perfect. But I have many friends that tell me like, hey, you know, you're being really hard on yourself. And I'm like, really? Like, I just feel like this is the expectation by the society, and that's why I'm trying to chase after this specific way of living or life. And so, you know, it's good to have that third perspective of talking to people such as your coach and them having the tools and the resources to guide you there. So yeah, thank you for sharing. How about you, Lilia? Do you have anything to add?
Well, yeah, I think something on the low self-esteem part, even something I'm kind of discovering recently, is it's like the idea of things that I believe are right or wrong that I kind of just bought into unconsciously. And kind of realizing that a lot of these standards I have of myself and other people aren't very like human. They're like just way beyond what's like humanly possible. And it's like I guess clearing the filter of a vacuum cleaner, where it's like, oh yeah, a lot of dust has accumulated, and I would be much better off without judging myself or others in the first place. But yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to see this stuff on my own, like without consulting an outside source, like coaches or friends, or I've been working through a 12-step addiction program recently as well. So people in that program, yeah, without talking to people, I don't know which ones are, something I want to that's reasonable to live up to now, and something that maybe it's actually for like 3 years later or 10 years later, right? Just like being more reasonable about it. And I think a lot of it also has to do with like not being completely clear what I wanted, right? So it's like it's like whenever I see someone else being successful at something, I'm like, oh yeah, I feel inspired. I guess I want that too. But when there's too many of those things, it can get super confusing. It's like, oh, I have one thing, but there's like 99 things I don't have. It's like I could do something right now, but then I'd be not working on those 99 things, and I seem to have a problem with that. Like, so it's like, I think, yeah, a lot about like clearing that stuff out of my head and realizing, oh, okay, actually like giving those over to like the power of the universe, because it's really like out of my control to like try and live up to all the things that my judgment is telling me to live up to. So
what does your judgments sound like? Like, what are they?
Yeah, well, for instance, it's like, well, Lilia, you're just a spoiled brat. You wasted your childhood playing games. Right? You don't deserve love. You don't deserve money because you're ungrateful. You're ungrateful, and like,
Oh man, did your
yeah.
parents tell you that?
Um,
Yeah.
Well, I would say mom and grandparents had like, there were some things they said that contributed to this, right? But I also very much did buy into the beliefs I just shared with you. And like a part of me really does, right? Because it's like, well, they raised me. I don't like, even though in theory I know I don't owe them anything, right? It's like still guilt. There's still guilt at my own deficiencies, and I look around me. It's like, there's so many members of my family. Well, they're older, right? They had different circumstances, but they're like more confident, they're less depressed, they're more successful. And here I am, sitting here spinning my wheels and acting like a coward a lot of the times and not wanting to engage with life. So, yeah, I'm not gonna lie, this is something I'm dealing with right now, and it's not completely over, but
No,
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah.
I think like just hearing about how other people's fears, like, because I know they didn't come from you first. It came from like the external world telling you that you're ungrateful and them painting your narrative. And it's hard when you're young because you believe them that they're painting this narrative because they're older than you, they take care of you. And it's so not fair because they didn't live the life that you're living up. It's a completely different generations. Our struggles are really different.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Yeah.
I definitely can add on to what Annie has said. I think one of your fears with just comparison and like not living up to your ancestors and your your family's, you know, accomplishments and how they've overcome certain things in life can be a huge expectation to meet, I think, for all three of us that we can relate to. And like Annie said, you know, we just came from a different time and place. We would feel so much more guiltier because it seems like we have it way better than them, and so we have more bigger expectations to meet, to you know, cover their sacrifices and things like that. And yeah, I
our
feel
world is so, I'm so sorry.
no, please keep talking.
Go
Please
ahead.
talking.
Yeah, I feel like from their perspective, like we are so much more privileged and lucky because we have like so much of these stuff, right? But I don't think that they realize there's like this internal world that these stuff have kind of contribute to making our lives kind of hard, right? It's easy to see the external, but not like really focus on like what's going on inside with like mental health. And that's why it's so important to discuss mental health, because it's something you can't see. And for a while, I like wondered if my parents would have been better off if I was just left as being a farmer in China, and I wouldn't have all these like crazy emotional problems, because I thought like, oh, it must be like a first world problem, like this mental health stuff. Then I realized like, oh, it's because they never realize this is a problem. They never even like looked at it. They just shoved it down, right? Because there's external factors that like I had to make them shove these things down. But we're now like we have to bring these things up, and we're carrying like multiple generations of problems. Yeah,
it's like a time ticking bomb. Like our parents don't realize it. It's like they're just holding all these things in from what they've experienced, and sometimes that kind of what happens is that they throw something a little bit like onto us that's like a little bit more that causes more, exactly.
When toxic people when toxic people like don't handle their emotional stuff, like it leaks out. And I think a lot of Asian parents, they are not aware of like how to handle these emotional problems. They either like drink, or they like my grandma was physical with me, and so like that's how it seeps over. And then as the child that's receiving these things, and even messages like things that aren't like as big, like you need to lose some weight, you need to eat more, you need to do all these like things where they're trying to control your life in a way, it really does hit us like as sensitive people. We do feel it all. We may not know how to describe it at the moment because like we're young, we don't know how to like interpret these things. Like when your parents are poor immigrants, like I didn't even know those terms until I went to college, and I realized like, oh wow, I'm disadvantaged. Like I'd never thought of that until I was older.
And and like carrying the the burden of all these things, like from our family's point of view, it's probably very normal. Like it's just like normal to be carrying that weight, to be carrying the standards and the expectations, and to try and keep us accountable to living to the same ones. So the word toxic may not even occur to them. But from our end, we're like, no, we know we want like a better quality of life. And that's those are some thoughts that came to mind.
There's definitely things I can think of where instances they have suggested me to like live a certain lifestyle, and they have like things like, hey, you should get like married at this age, which all of us can relate to also. And I'm just like, I'm just figuring my life out right now, so I don't know if I have time for that. And like, that already is, that expectation itself is already like very just doesn't meet the current era and the situation of our living lifestyle. That should like tell them like, hey, your values and your traditions are clearly against, well, some stuff that we're going through right now. It doesn't apply to us. So why are you trying to force these values down to ourselves?
Well, part of it is because also like we're exposed to so much new information and knowledge from around the world, and we gravitate towards lifestyles that our parents or grandparents couldn't even dream of and have no idea what we're talking about when we tell them about it. So there's we're like, if we're evolving, basically we're evolving beyond the old way of life. We recognize that maybe within our families for generations there has been an imbalance and emotional issues were never handled, and then in this generation maybe we're willing to take a pay cut to address these issues, right? Exactly. It's worth it to us because we've experienced the pain of like having a lot but feeling dreadfully unhappy.
And like the lifestyle of them, of like working very hard and not having other areas of life being met, such as like your social life and things, those different aspects of your life that are much more important. That was, what they lived through until a certain point that they've financially been stable, and they were kind of expecting us to do that. But for some of us, with the way that we're evolving, it's like, no, we want to prioritize these different areas of our lives, including our mental health, and take care of that while trying to still like meet financial goals and other things that are much more, that are also very important in life too.
Yeah. And I feel like in the Chinese culture and other Asian cultures, there's this like tug of war between pride and shame, right? So pride and responsibility and discipline, hard work, plus caring about family, right? Versus shame, all right? And that's like the standard and criteria. And I think that's something I very much bought into when I was much younger. It's like, oh, if I could just be like my hardworking, resilient grandparents, right? Like I'd be happy with myself. And I was just, it was a tug of war between that and, other things I wanted to be. I guess we are looking for more of a balance between, just, that either or and other things in our lives. And sometimes it can be hard to let go of that old identity. I didn't quit my the technology field for like 7 years because I was living in that, wanting to be proud and responsible and disciplined, which are empowering to a certain degree, but I burned out, right? That wasn't the life for me. But Annie, I wanted to hear from you, like, when your family members, got physical with you or they took things out on you, how did you process the hurt and the pain that resulted from those interactions?
Oh man, I think that it really took away my control over my life. Just a bigger person like slapping me and hitting me, it made me feel like I didn't have a lot of control. And I think that made me a more vulnerable person. I was a more vulnerable person, and I think I took that throughout college. I felt like I was very weak and I didn't have a lot of power and control in my life. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that like my grandma putting her hands on me would rob me of like my self-esteem and my ability to like navigate and control the world. I think a lot of times I just gave my power away to other people, probably because my grandma was the one that could take power away from me. One way that it manifested was blaming myself. Oh my gosh. When I accidentally showed my teacher this bruise, like my grandma pinched me really hard, and my teacher's like, hey, what's that? I'm like, oh, my grandma did that to me. And then it became such a huge thing where social services had to come in. And I was like, oh, I think I'm in trouble. I feel like I'm in trouble. And I told her that, like, yeah, my grandma hits me sometimes. And then the very same day, they called the police and they came in there and took my grandma away, and I blamed myself. And I think my mom and my mom also like blamed me. It's like, oh, it's your fault. And it's so messed up that we're blaming the victim for being abused and being honest about like what happened. And I was really mad at my counselor, Miss Candace, Canlas, and I was really mad at myself for a really long time. But fast forward to when I became a stronger person, I realized that was a really good thing that the adult Miss Canlas did for me, which was to report my grandma and to show her that that is not a way of teaching kids anything. And after that, I saw her again and I thanked her because I think, I don't know, I think I may have been like a butt to her afterwards, but I really thanked her for doing the right thing. She did the right thing by reporting that. And it now instilled into me the recognition that even though it's a hard thing to do and the person might hate you for doing it, you still have to do the right thing, because you can only hope that in the future they become better and recognize what you did for that person. Yeah.
Wow.
That is, thank you for sharing that, by the way. I know that is something that many people need to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I think like just thinking about how negative reinforcement has been normalized in Asian culture and how that is so not supposed to be normal, especially when it gets very extreme with like physical abuse and pain.
Yeah, it teaches the children that they don't have power over their lives, and they don't have consent from the beginning. Like when people are touching them, like dragging them around, teaches them that they don't have consent and the rights over their own bodies. And I think that's something that's really problematic in our culture. And I see that there are movements like for parents to not do that in the United States, and there are laws saying that you can't do that now. But as a person who has gone through that, I realize that's where a lot of my deep insecurities and not believing that I have power over my own life stem from, was because someone was just like taking it away from me. And that is when like I grew up and I realized like, hey, I'm the strongest person in my life now. After I went through like a very sad, deeply messed up moment where I felt I had no power over my life, and I wanted to just end it because I just felt like I had no power to make a difference in my own life. And in the moments of like wanting to do it, I felt really powerful. And then in my mind, it clicked, like, I am the most powerful person in my life right now. Like, if I have the power to take my life, I have the power to change my life. And that's when I kind of took back all the power that was like taken from me. I'm like, this is mine now. I am a powerful person and I'm gonna make choices for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Wow. That's so inspiring. Do you think when you decided to take more control of yourself, was it through therapy that you were able to change that mindset? What allowed you to get out of that mindset from feeling non-controlled to something like, oh, I could take control of myself now?
I think I was just really angry. I was really angry. I don't think that there's like a for sure blueprint of doing it my way. I think I just really lucked out in that thinking. It was that phrase that got stuck to me. It was just like, dang, I have so much power. Like, yes, if I have power to do this, then I have the power to change my habits, because my habits weren't like that great. But if I have this power to just like end a life, I have the power to like move my life. Like I was living in my house with an ex-boyfriend who I was still sleeping with because I craved like his love and affection. And in that way, like, was part of me like devaluing myself, demeaning myself. And I was living that life. I was just like, okay, change. I'm gonna find a way to move out of that house, move to Los Angeles, and rebuild a life that would make me happy. Yeah.
You change your habits and your lifestyle, like
Over
to change
time.
that environment. Yeah, and the environment really.
Yeah, environment is the biggest influence in like how you think and feel, because being in that environment with like a guy that was he was an okay guy, but like I was making myself a lot worse by being in that environment, and I needed to like get out. Yeah, so I mentally checked out of that relationship. Well, we were already broken up, so I had to really separate myself because I was still up on that. I'm like, hey, I'm still here. You still love me?
Yeah.
Oh, so sad.
Did you know there was a thing called codependency? It's a thing where people want to be with people. Well, I don't really know. I'm not a scientist, but like it's a thing. Like you just want to be with someone and you just can't be alone. It's just that feeling. You're like, I don't know, like, oh, like these people are. I don't know how to explain it, but
cool.
I think it is what you're going through.
Yeah, for me, I was always kind of a serial monogamist. I couldn't be without someone. And I realized that because I had such a rough childhood, that I really depended on escaping with like being with another guy. That's how I escaped. Just my family and their fighting. I was just always with another guy, and in that way it offered me kind of that companionship, that safety that I needed. And so I was always with someone else, and I was never like my own person. And so I had to like learn to be like independent.
Wow. I think both Lilia and I could relate in a way. I think I could relate to that transformation. I don't think I've been always in relationships. I've kind of dealt with like the polar opposite, where I'm just like, like I'm trying to find my own happiness. I don't need no man to make me feel happy about myself. So, and I want to be financially independent. That was kind of like my mindset from like in early, I think, college years and the relationship. So I'm really grateful that I developed that. But now I feel like right now I want to be more independent away from my family and kind of working onto that. And it's hard. I guess I could relate in that sense where I'm trying to, I love my family so much. I am fortunate to be in a household where I feel like I didn't deal with a lot of trauma on my end, but you know, they do have, they do hold me back in different ways up until this point of my life. Like I want to travel, I want to meet friends and more people, different cultural like values and things. Like I just want to grow. There's this part of me. I do want to go to Vietnam. Oh my gosh, the food there is so bomb.
Yes.
So it's like it's that urge of wanting to grow, personally grow. And I think what from your experiences, Annie, growing just like leaving these different environments, you must have felt uncomfortable at a certain point, and you when you decide to be independent, like you must have struggled a lot. So maybe share a little bit about tips on how to be more independent instead of
tips being more independent,
coping with transition and change and leaving familiar environments and so forth.
Yeah.
Dang, that is hefty. Well, for me right now, I'm going through some changes of just being in a new country and starting completely all over, and that kind of led me down a path of just being faced with my insecurities again. And oh my gosh, it could be very debilitating. But I'm so glad that now I have like these tools. One of them was isolating your negative self-talk, right?
Yeah.
Just recognizing the negative things that we say to ourselves. For me, my biggest one is "you're stupid." Like yeah. So with my fear counselor, he helped me isolate through meditation, just thinking, hey, when was the first time you felt like you were stupid? And it was when my dad called me stupid, and and he like never really talked to me. He was working all the time. So when he called me stupid, I really internalized that. And like now whenever I do anything, I see it with that lens of like you're stupid, you're not good at this, like why are you even trying? And it's so debilitating. So right now I am working on like silencing a lot of that by recognizing, hey, that's not your voice. Remember, that was when your dad said that to you. But let's reframe it. Reframe it. It's just like, did your dad really mean to say that? Or was he just really tired? And the language barrier, like stupid is probably like the most common phrase that like anyone knows how to say. So do you think that he felt okay with it when you ran off crying? Like he probably felt really bad about it. And in that way, I'm trying to convert like you're stupid too, like, oh you dummy, and it's more funny, oh you dummy, I know you can do better than this, right? Trying to convert it into a more like positive way. And it's been helping me a lot by curving those negative thoughts, because the more time that we spend thinking about the negative things, it just keeps growing. I've been working on curbing that muscle. The way that I think about it is kind of like a fire hydrant that's just shooting water of like negativity. I've been like learning how to just curve it towards like a brighter side, and over time that muscle gets stronger and stronger, and then you're just like there's a switch like after a while that you get better at doing this, and you start seeing more of the brighter side that gives you more energy and more light, so you can curb that.
Yeah. I like how you thought back about how there is ties with, again, your upbringing and your family trauma, and how that associated with how you feel about yourself inferiorly. And at the same time, you feel like you've somehow, I guess you had some type of closure in terms, I don't know if I'm assuming, maybe you're starting to have acceptance of what happened in the past with your family and some closures of what they said to you and labeling you with certain negative things that made you feel bad about yourself. And I guess that allowed you to move on and changing, I guess, your habits of thinking to a more positive light.
Yeah, getting a little, just understanding the world a little bit better now, just having traveled. I realized how limited my parents were in their opportunity and thinking as like immigrants who don't know the language very well. They had life like more difficult. And one thing that traveling out here has like helped me really relate to my family is like that I don't know the language. And so I just like awkwardly like, help me, I don't know what I'm saying, I don't know what I'm doing. And like it's that discomfort. I'm like, oh, this is what my parents had to go through like their whole time being in America, that like discomfort. And then I stopped being like mad at my mom for doing that when I was younger, being like inappropriate and like like she's just trying her best to communicate in the way she knew how. And in that way now I appreciate that, because that kind of gave me the resilience to be like, okay, I'm gonna put myself out here and look like an idiot and just try to get some communication in.
I think you're doing a wonderful job just pushing yourself, living, and on top of that, connecting back to your roots and having some type of connection to your family and what they've taught you, the good and the bad, right? But you're taking it with you and you're learning and you're taking it in a way that you're just growing, which I think is very inspiring, just to tell you.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely want to try to communicate these things back and break it down and try to figure out how to help other people relieve some of this pain, like going back on like subtle Asian mental health group. Like, oh my God, like when I read the stories, like it brings me back to like all the childhood pain, and I'm just like, I cannot believe how I'm like surprised that like this is still going on. And I realize like, oh yeah, I'm baffled. This is so much pain. There's just so much pain there. And I want to somehow be a better communicator, better person to try to like relieve some of the pain.
Yeah. I think you're just talking about your experiences with your family, the negative ones, and how you can overcome the trauma, I think is very important. That's why we're having this podcast today. So since we're already...
I feel really bad about the circumstances. Oh, go ahead.
No, please
go ahead.
Yeah. No, please. Please talk about circumstances.
I feel really bad about the circumstances with COVID now, and the economy that has forced all the young people to like move back home with their parents. I feel really bad about that. It feels really like, I would imagine feeling really, really trapped. For me, like I decided that was like the worst thing for me, was being trapped back at that house. I rather go back into debt. And that's like kind of what happened. I had school debt, but then like I started tacking on a lot of like like personal debt too. But for me, it was kind of really worth it to get out of that bad environment for me to grow myself. So I'm always trying to encourage people to like move away from their parents to figure out who they are without their influence.
Yes. Yes. I know a friend who exactly did something similar to what you did. She is a really close friend of mine. She's always had a lot of conflict with her traditional Chinese family. And I remember those nights where she would call me out at like 9 or 10 p.m. and she'd be like, Angela, like I'm walking out of my house in my slippers. Like I'm going through some argument with my parents. And she's like in these blankets and just like hovering on herself. And she's just like trying to get me to give her some emotional support. And she always had this mindset of like struggle with her own family and herself and finding her independence and her happiness. And eventually she did that by going outside, moving out. After graduation, she busted her butt to graduate within 3 years with her journalism degree. She moved to Australia. She did this crazy traveling kind of thing that everyone admires about at a young age, that we all want to do eventually. And she has all these crazy experiences. Like she's like, oh, I met like these people, I made out with these people, I couch surfed. And she also had like these Zen moments that I think is very admirable to look at, because you also experience some of that too. You're like, finding that acceptance and comfort within yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
She had that too. She's talked about like her experiences going to Fiji and just like meeting these people from these cultural villages. And this overall, she definitely had her struggles, fair share of struggles being a solo traveler. And as a female Asian, she dealt with racism. She's dealt with weird stereotypical like interactions with people, because every country and place is different in terms of like how they see an Asian American female. And so she told me all these experiences. She also taught abroad in China for a few years just to find her own independence. And she's doing really well when she was just like teaching abroad, kind of doing what you're doing, Annie. And that was, that's now she's back in the US, and that was due to COVID. It's just very unfortunate that she stopped her travels and her way of like living due to the situation. But she overall still feels like, she has the option of living with her family. Even up to this point, she's really just determined to have her own independence outside of her family, that she's willing to take her own struggles and build on that depth, build on these troubles of finding herself, I think financially, just by like living away from her family. And she's now like living somewhere in San Francisco or like Oakland, but which is like a little bit outside of her, where she lives with her family. So that's kind of where she is now. And I really admire her. She still has her own struggles, I think, emotionally, and I know a lot of people during COVID right now is actually feeling very like isolated. And on top of that, trapped, like you said, especially if they live back with their family members. So, I think that's how, your experiences definitely are relatable. That's all I could say. A lot of people are doing that.
Yeah, I think in a way, like with your friend Angela, I could almost see that her parents being very difficult and being hard on her, gave her that drive to kind of like break the eggshell and become her full fantastic self, and propelled her to find something, and that would take her away from the pain of living in the situation she was before. And so that was like a lot of motivation. She ended up exploring so many things that a lot of us wouldn't otherwise. I guess what I guess what I'm looking for is in my own life is to have that same level of motivation without because I'm lucky not to be at a huge huge disagreement with my family right now. So it's probably not pain that's going to motivate me as much as pleasure. Like actually intentionally creating it, even if depression says today you're at a -5, but still creating it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, for me, I think I still live with my family at the moment, and I hope that I think I still build like mental, like for those especially who are still living with their family, I feel like you definitely do need to build a boundary with your family.
Yeah.
As I have been during COVID, I try to have some room for myself. I mean, that's just been just getting out of the house. I mean, that's been my way of like just having some time for myself, and just really don't I guess like not to start anything, especially when like emotional like conversations that come up. I guess my way is to just kind of try to walk out for a little bit or do my own thing first and then come back into it and talk to them. I don't know, maybe you guys could maybe you could relate, Lilia, maybe you could relate, Annie, when you've moved back with your family. Do you guys remember any of those like conversations that you've had, or maybe like those moments that you can?
Yeah, it's really like when they're asking how are things going career wise? Are you making money, right? Do you have a stable job, right? And well, my initial way to deal with it was to explode. Like 7 years of resentment. I was never really a kid who was comfortable. I still am not that comfortable showing anger, but I just kind of I let them have it, right? And then realized that I really didn't like being that way, because I'm only creating more damage being that way, even though it would felt so good to like let it out, right? But I realized like 50% what I was saying actually didn't completely make sense. It's like in my own context, uh I was wronged. I felt wronged in many ways, through the way they brought me up. But from their end, using their values and standards, they were right. So it's like I don't know if this argument is really valid. So that's where I realized a lot of the darkness is in me. It's like it's all these like years of I guess growing up with them, absorbing their viewpoint and criticisms of me, and also absorbing judgments from other places in the world. Even though I wasn't the one being judged, I just picked up all these like values and expectations. So it was like, became this massive, like I became like a walking source of toxicity without even knowing it, right? So that's something I needed to kind of like process, and I'm still processing that. Letting go of a lot of those old judgments I've had. But Yeah. I was actually even thinking on what Annie mentioned earlier about kind of seeing, for instance, where your dad was coming from when he said you were stupid. And
Mhm.
I kind of just realized, oh, when my family calls me spoiled, right, for yeah, when they call me spoiled, right, part of it is probably because they're not comfortable with like dealing with my emotions. They're not comfortable dealing with their own emotions even. And to see that, the thing they strive their whole lives for, which is like, financial prosperity, which they equate with happiness and well-being, like to see them striving their whole lives for it and to have me come out and still not be happy, like that kind of feels disempowering, right? But it's like, every human probably needs to learn that at some levels. Like when you reach the top, when you get everything, right? That doesn't guarantee your happiness, because there's actually what there is to do is to like, yeah, learning to be, I guess, happy with what is, and to discard those like judgments of not being enough, right? That's what needs to happen, but they don't know, right? So it's like and it may be actually like hurting them to see me disappointed in, like, like them working so hard for me, that because they're needing empathy, it is hard for them to help me deal with
Mm.
my own stuff unless I help them help me. Right? So it's like, wow, yeah, like that's what I just realized when I'm really like, yeah, standing from their perspective. And I think even, yeah, like I was called stupid a number of times too, growing up, and I think just standing in their shoes, yeah, it may be that, again, it's like feeling frustrated and impatient with needing to break it down to small enough steps for me to follow, but not knowing how, right? And not knowing how to deal with emotions, but also wanting me to be at my best and trying to challenge me to face the discomfort and learn, right? So there's like a good
Mm.
intention and motivation behind, like, I think they're thinking, but
Yeah,
yeah, doesn't
definitely.
balance.
Yeah. I could think of a couple situations where like they would say things that are, with what they're going through. I think my dad had said some really negative things to me too, and he would be like, you're not going to be a good wife if you don't do this in the household. That's all he's been telling me lately. If you don't do it, there's always only one way of doing things in the household for me. And it's like, if I don't do it their way, then it's going to be wrong. I'm like, dude, like, there's more than one way to like set the chopsticks, for example, on the table. Like there's more than one way to wash your dishes and more than one way to cook certain things. So, but he doesn't see that. He's like, no, this is the only one way to clean the house. This is only one way to clean the dishes. And that's how he applies that mindset in a lot of things that I do in my life. And I guess part of that kind of makes me feel like, he's just taught a lot of things that he tells me, including the negative toxicity of like certain labeling and things like that. That's how they were also brought up. And it was in a way to make us more motivated to be better become better persons of ourselves, I guess. But we've all in a way kind of learned to go back into our roots and just like try to understand their upbringing, instead of just like feeling like they're treating us a certain way without really trying to understand their perspective. But even then, still very hurt, but still at the same time.
Yeah, that's why I do really, really want it for a time where everyone has the opportunity to move away from their parents, because I feel like I completely relate to how you feel like when you're like going to explode, because it's like you're in a like boiling pot like of pressure, and like you're not living your own life, you're living like under a dictator's life, like of this is like my house, this is how I like to do it. And yeah, sure, that's great for you guys, but it doesn't allow you to have your own individuality, and you're reminded of that like every day. It's hard to not feel like you're boiling over and the scabs reopen. It's so painful. And I like love that and appreciate that you guys are trying to understand their perspective. But I think like in a way, like it would be really, really stronger once like you heal your own wound. So it's not like two multiple parties just like hurting each other over and over again. Yeah.
Would you say like you're a lot more happier after moving out of the house and living yourselves independently?
Yeah, so I see it with my brother. Me and my brother, he stayed at home. He stayed at home. He chose to live at home because it was free rent, and it was in San Francisco, and it looked really good, but the consequences are that he has to deal with invasion of privacy, like humiliation and all that. He was willing to take that, but for me, I was not. And it's really sad coming home and seeing that like no one really has grown out of their trauma. Like I feel that my brother kind of has, it's really hard to say this, but like has kind of insulated himself in this like protection of my family, and that he wasn't allowed to grow because he's the son, like people took care of him, but it didn't allow him to grow as an individual. Yeah, so it's hard for me to come home, but like when I do come home, I come home like as like a rainbow, like, and everyone loves to see me, and they say like all these positive things, and sure, like random things come at me, but because it doesn't happen all the time, like, okay, you can say that, Mom, I know you don't mean it. Yeah, and just having the power to like leave and come back, I do cherish spending more time with them. Yeah.
I think about my brother as well, and we both live in the same environment, right? But he took things a lot more emotionally over time. I gotta confess, everybody I grew up with a good mental boundary over time, emotional boundary with my parents, and that allows me to still live life in a way that doesn't allow them to take all controls of my life. But I may act actually really rebellious. Now I'm just like, if I feel like doing this, I'll do it. I don't care if I get yelled at. Like that's just kind of the mindset, because I want to live my life despite being in the same house,
Yeah.
But my brother, on the other hand, it's like he's taken so much to a point that his own self-esteem has been affected, unfortunately, that he is just lost. And it's so sad to see him like go through that. And I don't know how to help him. I'm like, hey, you want to go to a mental health counselor to sort out your feelings and the things that you've dealt with from mom and dad? And he's just like, I don't know. No, I don't feel like it. And he's just like closed off, and he doesn't really want to grow. He doesn't really want to overcome it. And I'm like, I'm trying my best to like emotionally support him. But these are things that, many families and people deal with. And it does make a big difference, I'm pretty sure, if we did change our environments.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really hard topic. Yeah, just like brothers and like people who are just like really stuck in it and can't ask for help. Yeah.
It's, I mean, there could be several things, right? It's like maybe they've tried to deal with it before. Maybe it's just like so overwhelming. Like, where's that light at the end of the tunnel? And on top of it, opening up as Asian men, that is another. It's a surprisingly huge thing because I've encountered a number of Asian guys before, and let's just say not a like it's a blessing when you meet one who is like very open and expressive about their emotions, but the rest of them get pretty sensitive when the topic of therapy is brought up. And I don't know how to solve that mystery yet, but I did hear in the transformation conference that there was like this one woman had worked, like she was herself getting therapy first, and her partner needed help as well. But it was harder to open up because, like, as a man, you're supposed to be like, the head of the household, and like there's this image they're trying to live up to, being tough and all that. And it was her opening up to him multiple times over a longer period of time that helped him eventually start to seek help and process his emotions as well. Yeah.
Annie, have you dated some Asian men while in Vietnam?
I love my Asian boys.
Yeah.
I think I only date Asian guys. Or yeah. I've been really lucky and really fortunate in my time to date like very sensitive people who are really open to me. I think I like put that energy out there where it's just like, hey, I am like unconventional, a little bit wild, and if like you can't hang with that, then you can bounce, kind of. And people were able to like rise to the occasion.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've done the opposite too, where I'm just like, oh, not really knowing what I want and just like exploring and just getting what I get. That kind of backfired on me. So I now ask for what I want, and I was very lucky. Oh yeah, my soulmate's downstairs, and he's just one of the most sensitive, like beautiful human beings, and he's like very good at like invoking his emotions, and he like even helps me try to like identify what I'm going through too. So I feel really lucky.
That is awesome.
I think there's this like stereotype of Asian men not having to have emotions, and that kind of like gave me that kind of bias when I started early like on dating like Asian men, which I kind of prefer too. It's just my preference. They look cuter. I've been involved with K-pop at a younger age, so that's just me and my preferences of like what good looking means to me. And my experiences, although very limited, in terms of dating Asian men and how they express their feelings, they tend to joke around a lot more. Like, okay, there's variances. I know some male guy friends who are like just, they like to joke around more and they avoid their feelings. They don't really talk about things like family trauma or like, what they're internalizing, other than at a surface level. It's really hard to express that. And there's just that expectation that they're not supposed to, because it makes them like all genders as well, Asian culture in general. But for men, it's much more pressure to be more like having an ideal personality of self where they're just perfect all around, and so they just try not to show it. And so my experience with my first time experiencing having to deal with a sensitive guy, Asian guy, was, you know, odd because he started sharing his vulnerabilities to me, but I didn't know how to process it. I wasn't ready emotionally. And he's like, you know, I have these needs, and this is how I feel about you. And, you know, maybe we can, you know, it's just all these feelings. And I'm like, oh, I don't know how to take it all in, because I thought men is supposed to be like, manly people are supposed to not have feelings. And I had to learn it the hard way, you know, and realize, like, you know, Asian men equally should have feelings as much as women. And it's beautiful that, Annie, you're allowing that, you know, to allow men to, just Asian men in general, just like opening up about their vulnerabilities and being open about their feelings. And that's such a exciting thing.
Yeah. I think guys can be more vulnerable with women, like one-on-one, just like Lilia said, like just revealing some of your vulnerabilities, your faults, the struggles that you have. Really, it creates that environment where they feel comfortable communicating that right away. The struggle, I think the dangerous part is when like some guys really use girls as like their counselor or as like their girlfriend to fix them. Because I know some guys who do that, who are just like, you're gonna be my emotional support and you're gonna be my girlfriend, and like I'm gonna put all my baggage on you. They have no clue that like emotional labor is a lot.
Yeah, I actually I have a friend who openly admitted to doing that with a previous girlfriend, or maybe his wife, before they married. But he was like, yeah, and then I sought out help because I realized I really needed. You know, he used to be, in his own words, like a robot. So he's like engineering guy, very logical, right? Like zero EQ in his own words, right? And and he kind of just like started learning later in life, and he's like, and we both kind of share like this relatedness around feeling like we're learning sometimes very essential skills much later in life, right? Starting at age, I don't know, 20 something or 30, like basic social skills.
That's okay. And that's okay. Totally. We all are growing. I know some people who just started like being more social after college. So it's like we're all in different stages.
Yeah. Yeah. And even though I somewhat identify with being an empath, quote unquote, there is a lot of basic principles that around dating and around like nonviolent communication that I didn't really learn until recently. I really didn't learn. I really didn't even know that, like, a much larger portion of my thoughts that I knew were judgments, right? And it's like, when I say I like things like even saying, well, I feel belittled or I feel attacked, right, is kind of implying that someone else did that to me. So if I just like say to someone, well, you made me feel belittled, right, like that's actually not the most like open way to communicate. It's more like, hey, when you did this, I was disappointed, or I felt small, because I was hoping that XYZ, like, instead, right, like, putting it more on me, right, like very subtle parts of language.
Wow.
Yeah.
I agree. That's so powerful.
That's so cool. Yeah.
That like that little difference, like the I language versus you language. You is like very aggressive. Like you did this to me. Like you embarrassed me in front of my friends. That already signifies to that person that you're responsible and that was their intention. Once you say that, it's so hard to be on the other end of it and like dispute them because they're like, this is truth. And it's just like, no, like I was just being dorky and you felt embarrassed. I'm sorry. Yeah. That's a really good, like powerful tool that you've uncovered and like realized. Yeah. It's so cool.
Yeah. And sort of like going back much earlier, Angela, to some things you were mentioning about like how your dad wants you to put chopsticks this one way, right? I think one indirect way to get to the root of that could be to ask, ask him questions about like his family and, how the woman behaved and what were the consequences when the woman in his family didn't, follow the rules per se, right? Who would get mad, so on and so forth. That could be a signal. I uncovered a surprising number of things when I asked my mom a couple of days ago, hey, how far back in our family tree are you aware of, right? It's like, how far back can you trace our family tree? And it became this whole excited sharing from her end about just like the different ways the older people like her grandparents lived their lives, and what were their values around money, right? Where did those stem from? Why, I actually found out why she had such a high fear of me quitting school early, because she was like, well, there's a couple of what is it, second or third cousins you have who had a dad who was very aggressive business wise and could have made it, but he was running a coal mine and it fell apart, right? Fell apart, and his entire life fell apart, and they got a divorce, right? And then he had these two sons who were, one of them was a gambler. He wanted to, like, he took big risks to make things big like his dad, but didn't, like, she was like, well, neither he or his brother had the work ethic to really stick with one thing or finish school or get something stable, and they're not in the best place either. So she's like, I don't want that to happen to you. And I'm like, man, I could have asked her this like 5 years ago and that would have cleared up so much for me, right? But that was one thing. And another thing I uncovered by asking her that question is why she and my grandpa on her side, so it's like why she and her dad are so cautious of what they say and do around people, and keep warning the rest of us not to speak out too much, right? Is because back then, like during the Cultural Revolution and whatnot, so many people around them died because they wanted to assert themselves and stand for their rights and make a change. And so what they learned in that environment was to play under the radar, is to live a little bit longer. That was like their main driving force, is to like live doing something stable, making an income, doing something respectable. And yeah, like her grandpa, which is her dad's dad, had 6 kids, managed to pull 6 kids through that difficult time. And he was yeah, it's like not a small accomplishment. And what they usually do is like they try their best to make their bank, like, support their own family, and then like have their kids eventually marry and support themselves as well. So it's like not a small accomplishment that they've like that so many members of the family have gotten to where they are, but they were never really truly in my mom's words, they were not really gifted with business, not really gifted with sales. And part of me also thinks that it is because of all the stuff that happened, with the coal mine, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like collapsing in on people, right? And it's not like they didn't try. They tried, right? But there are some, like, it's just, you know when someone in the family does go for business, right, something higher risk, higher reward, the rest of the family tends to freak out because there were a lot of times where that wasn't successful. And so that's the like I'm pretty sure if I dug more, I could actually find out subconsciously what their beliefs around money are that have been preventing them from really building the businesses they wanted to. But yeah, it's a very revealing question just to ask about, hey, like what was your grandpa's lifestyle and your grandma's lifestyle, and how did the two their worldviews differ, and just being curious, it can reveal a lot of information, a lot, especially if they love talking about family history, which my mom does.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like I need to start talking to my parents about these things a little bit. I used to like actually despise it because like that they use it as a way to nag at you. They're like, I went to America for you to go to school. That was the typical like nagging. And I'm just like, oh, I don't want to hear it. And so, but then, you think about like their history and their upbringing with their family. And I think it's also good to learn about their lifestyle back then, how their values were brought up over time. And it's, again, it brings out that empathy and like that connection of okay, like I guess this is why they want to say these certain things to me. Right?
It's like underneath every single jab or judgment or criticism they may have of you, there's like they have an underlying need. It could be to be heard, right? To have their needs be recognized as valid, right? It could be their wish to see you successful. It could even be their wish to see you happy by trying to give you a kick in the butt. But it's like these underlying needs are not wrong. It's just the approach they follow may not be as effective because we're actually learning more like through psychology that, hey, shaming and fear-based environment is not the best way to motivate a person to change. Like, and this is why, right? Like, I could judge myself to death for like so many things, right? But that doesn't motivate me to lose weight. That doesn't motivate me to actually be a better person. If anything, it just discourages me, right? I can't actually improve if I'm like, well, being a good person is too damn hard, and it's so far away, and I'm not there, right? Like, yeah, so. It's like, hey, parents, if you if you, let's say, spoke to me in this particular way, that could help you meet your need to see me thriving, or to see me like improving faster, or I don't know, but like even that, right? It's like their need to see us improving faster. Actually, maybe that's not even a valid need now that I think about it, because, well, I don't want to invalidate their needs, but it's like if they're, if their self-worth as, a parent or whatnot is like dependent on our success, something is a little bit off about that too. I'm gonna be honest. Yeah. So it's sort of like, okay,
kind of like a trophy, hey,
like,
my success is based on my daughters and my sons, and no, you gotta bring on that legacy.
And they're probably not gonna admit to that, maybe subconsciously having that. They'll say, well, it's out of love, right? They want to admit to the part where it's out of love, of course, right? That's definitely there too. So, they're worried, right? They can be worried for safety, whatnot. They care about us, right? So, yeah. I mean, in my own life, I've had so many, fears. I've dealt I felt so many fears around just different things, right? And it's not like I can one day, stop fearing and stop judging all at once. And I think it's the same with my with parents or family too. Is like they probably they've seen some shit happen in this world, much more than I've ever seen, right? So I already have a lot of fears, but they probably have even more, right? And I think a lot of times their judgments and criticism do come from that place of fear too. So yeah,
definitely with the COVID situation happening, I think uncertainty really just creates that fear a lot more, especially with our families, our parents, and even ourselves.
And if we think about it, right, like this, I think in the Asian culture, we're kind of taught that, well, willpower solves a problem. We need to solve our problems, use a very kind of like yang kind of energy instead of yin energy to like solve problems, right? Deal with our lives. And but like the problem is that a lot of these things, like with COVID, it just reveals to us, right, so many things are outside of our control. It's like, even the like what used to be much easier in the past, like getting a job, right, is not as easy in this time. So the old way of operating and wanting to manage and control things to a high standard is like falling apart, like, and that might be a good thing, but a lot of people, it's like going through like a toxic purge, with drug withdrawals, right? It's like, I really want to believe that I can control all this. I really do. I really want to believe that I can control other people, but no, like, cannot.
And it could definitely stem back into our parents and just them telling us like, hey, you should do this, hey, you should do this. Even they themselves are trying to figure themselves out, but it's like with like the whole how they should like adapt to the whole situation as well as us.
It's definitely, it's like, a lot of stress, right? Like I can't even imagine like the expectations my older family members put on themselves. They might be way higher than the ones I put on myself, just because they come from a different era where it's like constantly drilled into them all the time. At least my parents are easier on me because maybe my mom or dad kind of realized that constant drilling wasn't working for them, and they've been a lot easier on me. But yeah,
definitely relatable. Yeah, I could say I think for people who want to evolve, it's necessary to create that boundary with your parents and be like, hey, like you can't tell me no more. You can't control me. like what Annie said, right? Like, you can't control me anymore, guys.
Yeah. It's also really important to do what you're doing is identifying your fears, and seeing where they come from, and recognizing like, oh, these are my parents' fears from like 60 years ago. Like, sure, they were valid then, but they don't apply anymore. Like now, instead of like speaking out, we get murdered. Like speaking out, we actually get the benefits of getting what we want now in a less sexist society. Like women demanding for what they want is a very different result of what happened to them back then. So we have to do the work of isolating that fear and saying like, oh, thanks for coming by, like you don't apply to me, bye. And yeah, I take it as like a very meditative kind of way. It helps me to like really visualize like these things, give it like corporeal form, because like they're so much harder to imagine if they're like invisible. So giving them a name and maybe even like a character, like to actually visualize it, like, oh, hey, you're here. Let's see how long you'll like stay here, but not let it like seep into your mind, like and take over your body, like that fear, your parents' fears. Yeah. That's why I still like really advocate like when y'all have the ability to not to take some time away, because you're always just like influenced by the people near you, and that's the difference between me and when I was living at home, like constantly being reminded of like my pains and struggles, like and things that they're making me focus on, like which wasn't really like what I needed to focus on. But being out in Vietnam, I felt like I could run faster because I wasn't like constantly reminded certain things to focus on that wasn't really what I cared about. And then developing a network of people who were very similar in that thinking. So instead of like reeling you back, like, oh yeah, how like they're really excited about like your project, and that their excitement gives me excitement. So there's like so much more energy about being in a positive environment versus one that's always kind of like holding you down.
Yeah, I think for me and Lilia, we have similar experiences where we try to, even though we physically cannot move away from our family at the moment, and for some it's they're dealing with it a lot harder. I think some suggestions would be like finding those social groups that me and Lilia have done. We have reached out to make friends online, you know, having online communities during COVID. And that has transformed my mindset and encouraged me to keep on going with things and projects that are very unconventional, that my parents can't even understand, but things that I love to passionately do. And that in that sense, I grew a lot this year for that reason, just being able to mentally have that boundary and just wanting to talk to friends and people who could understand my growth, the things that I'm feeling, things that I'm dealing with my family. I think that's, and therapy, of course, and that's very important. And having my own hobbies and things outside of the house, that's very, very important.
100%. Yeah, it's where we get fuel to have, you know, more of the difficult conversations with family when we need to, because without that fuel, it's like, you know, like I will be a full-on bitch at home, and you know, don't want to end up that way.
When I go out to take walks, I have the self-talk, and at home it's strange how I I'm more harder on myself, I realize,
Mm-hmm.
compared to when I'm by myself, like outside and I'm just walking around in nature. I'm like, what do I really want? I get all zen and I get all spiritual with myself. Like, what do I really want in life? I look up at the skies and just reflect back in life. And, you know, I would be like in a big mountain. I was just like, what have I done for myself up to this point? You know, the good points, the good and the bad, you know, so environment really does make a difference.
It does.
It allows you to reflect to yourself a lot more differently too. And you'll deal with more struggles, of course. I think in any situation, again, it's like you have all these other problems that will come up when you're living independently, such as bills and living with certain, you know, different people in the house. That has its own issues too, right? But you also have your own personal growth that is very unique, and it can be very positive too. Yeah. Cool stuff. Wow. And we also, you know, I think the more we get away and move into different environments and move around and talking to different people with different backgrounds, we realize like, oh, wow, like all these perspectives there's so many different perspectives that we can learn from and absorb from them too. Like for me, I have the need to travel out and like meet different people of different backgrounds because I know I can learn from them. They have their own struggles and their own history, you know, and their own traumas, of course, and their upbringing. And that's especially for different POC communities. Like, you know, different socioeconomic backgrounds. They teach you so much about what we see in our lives currently can be very different to theirs, and how they see the society in general is very different. Like, for example, you know, the Black, the BLM movement, right? They're like, oh, we've been repressed all this time in the society. You guys have been, you know, just the things that their upbringing and our upbringing is so different. The more that you talk to these people of different backgrounds, the more you realize, there's like so many cultural knowledge and perspectives that we have yet to see about the world and how we see other people around us. So, you know, drawing that back, you know, to how changing environments are so important, you know, we can add that on into like how we, I guess, grow and accept with things that we've, you know, had difficulties with, and also understand about our families just in a different way, you know.
I think it certainly helps to like eliminate that help eliminate that black and white thinking that I think we may have been raised with or just tend to fall into, at least for me as a depressive, like that is still something I deal with, but definitely the more perspectives I learn, the easier it is to deal with that and to be okay being in a gray zone. Being black and white is comfortable, right? But being in gray zone is where the specialness is, where the rainbow is.
I like to ask you, Annie, when you moved to Vietnam, have you dealt with any cultural shocks, and has it ever affected the way you've seen things in America? How did that apply to your personal growth?
Cultural shocks. I think just coming out here, I feel a lot more grateful. Just how everything is so much more like affordable. Like everything is like you can, it's quite affordable in the way that like everyone can go out and enjoy, compared to places like Bali where it's mostly just foreigners kind of just occupying the restaurants, and then a lot of the local people can't really enjoy it. And then that's kind of how I felt like living in LA. Just it was too expensive to even drive around. Gas was really expensive. restaurants, their meals would be like $15 for a meal without a drink. And so I'm like, isn't that like a whole hour's worth of work? And it was just not accessible. Whereas being here, you can just see like everyone, like Vietnamese people coming in and enjoying these really nice places. Everyone could afford it. Like their economy is doing really well. And I felt like that was kind of like an explosion of like, oh my gosh, like living in America, there was like certain places that was inaccessible to me because like I couldn't afford to live there. Whereas here I can kind of like explore and play. That was one. And it really revealed to me like that America isn't as like great, especially with like just seeing how like they're handling COVID and everything. Just and the oh my gosh, yeah. Just like their handling of COVID was very not good compared to how Vietnam was just like, okay, we're just gonna close down our borders. That's it. We're not gonna accept anyone in. And that really like stamped out a lot of the cases. But in the US, it was like they were really slow to it. And it was a lot of like political debate whether like it was going to affect people or how like serious it was. That was kind of really eye-opening.
Wow. No, I could see that on that outside perspectives. I'm so glad though, because now you get to live life without having to deal with the situation over here, at least.
It's yeah. So I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, honestly, right? Like I think you know, you realizing that kind of signals how like maybe something that Americans may have known a long time, which is that the American dream has been blown out of proportion, and it's really maybe not as great as we think it is. I know Trump wanted to make America great again, but like, you know, yeah, there's so many places in the world that might be a better fit for our values. You know, and I think just like the Asian culture, like the American culture is very like status driven and at times status obsessed. And when we like come from an upbringing where like we got enough to eat, we got our like basic physical needs met, you know, the like we're going to realize at some point, you know, having more of that money alone isn't going to bring us that happiness. And you know, contrast that with like in Vietnam, how you have, you know, freedom, you have like good people around you, there's more you can do at lower cost, right? You know, life itself is more fulfilling than back in America where things are very like, I feel like there's like a rigidity, you know, with how much you can move around and how much you can do, and that the system maybe isn't serving people quite as well as it could, right?
Especially like I don't think they have a lot of debt here. I think there's a lot of debt in America that a lot of I didn't realize that that was like an American problem where like a lot of Americans are like stuck in debt. And that's a lot of it student loan debt. And I'm just like, whoa, like how can we, it was just, I'm still like processing it. It's just like how can so many of the American people like be stuck in debt but like still live pretty like convenient like appearing lives. I'm still processing that. And is that a good thing? Like I personally don't like having a lot of debt in my life. Like it's such a like debilitating thing. And I'm just like, okay, like a majority of Americans are stuck in debt. And I feel like that is so wrong and kind of abusive what's happening. Also realizing that like a lot of the Asian countries, like China, is like manufacturing really cheap things, and we sell it back to Americans for like 35 times more, like so much more. And that a lot of people are really just trying to like advertise to Western people to get them into things, because we know that they have money that they're willing to like spend like a buttload of, because that's standard, you know, it's standard to pay like $35 for an item. But when you come over here, just like, whoa, this thing is only like literally like $5 or even less. Yeah, so like we're in the United States, you're kind of conditioned to like want to pay more
for better quality or like living lifestyle.
Yeah. But that's not necessarily like, you're just conditioned to like want to like spend so much more money. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, it kind of bringing up the advertising industry too. Like we just like, you know, sold on so many things. It's hard to resist the, you know, the temptation for those things. But yeah,
we you know, after talking to you guys, I am just shocked by how powerful media plays in the way we're living in America. And I don't know what the media advertisements are like in other countries like Vietnam, but I'm pretty sure it does something similarly, where media can affect the way that we think, what we accept, even if we don't appreciate, like in terms of like paying a lot of debt. It's normal because you know, there's all these advertisements and you see like people talking about like their debt, and you're like, okay, I guess it's normalized, right? And like how just the body images and of how we should see ourselves, how we should live, like we should live more lavishly and have these cars and certain things.
And it's like it's funny because a lot of us will probably say that, you know, no, of course we value like you know, human relationships more than we value accomplishments or buying that car or house. But when you start getting like when you look at like, you know, certain studies that psychologists have done, they did one on kids, right? And they showed a bunch of kids an advertisement about a cool toy. I saw a lot of those growing up, right? But they'd show
the 90s ads.
They'd show an advertisement, and then after seeing the advertisement, almost all of them would choose to play with the mean kid who had the cool toy versus the nice kid who had no toy. So it just it affects us actually more than we think. And I spoke with a friend not too long ago, and his view on the media is that it's like the quality of it and the accuracy of it is like, you know, how well it represents people and how, you know, realistic people are meant to be in those films or, you know, news articles or whatever. It's based on the quality of the, you know, the film writers thinking, or, you know, the screenwriters thinking, or, you know, if there's like, you know, anti-Asian stereotypes that they have, well, it's gonna bleed into like all, you know, all of what they produce, and that influences us. Or if they believe that you know, like if they believe that money and status intrinsically makes people more valuable than people who don't have it, then that's going to bleed into all the media too, right? So Yeah.
Wow. You know, I am shocked by how that can influence how we.
Sorry,
Sorry.
it's getting really late for me over here.
Yeah.
It's like one.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for
Do you-
talking to me. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to do this again, or
Yeah, of course. I love
I guess
talking to you
we'll
guys.
talk about body positivity
Yeah, I
on the
love
next
the talks
one.
that we've had. Yeah.
Yeah,
We
I'm
covered a
sorry
lot of
for
ground
keeping
today.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked about like some like unexpected things that was very profound. I'm gonna have, yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah.
I feel super energized by our talk today. Thank you
Yeah.
both. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's definitely, pick another time to do a body positivity one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy. Now I'm just thinking a lot of stuff after this.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Take that energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. You guys are amazing content creators. I like love your consistency. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. No,
So
I love
talking.
yours as well. I love your content too, Annie.
Oh, man. I definitely want to I'm very inspired by y'all always just like constantly putting stuff out there. So it really encourages me to be like, oh wow, like being a part of your community and just getting that muscle into just creating. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll try to make this more organized so
That
that
is
you can
beautiful.
jump into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Annie. I'm just inspired. Overall, very positive.
I love it. We got our group.
I got a group. Woohoo.
Yay.
All right. Good night.
Okay.
I'll see you
Have a
next
good
time.
night.
Yeah, have a good
Bye.
night, both of you.
Bye.